Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for everyone that is joining today. Just going to do a quick check to make sure that my slides are visible. Looks like they are. So thank you so much again for everyone that's taking time out of their morning or lunchtime on the East Coast to hear about some exciting announcements and just about what Snorkel is and what we build on this live stream today. So I'm Alex. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO, and also started the Snorkel Research Project back at Stanford in 2015. And today I'm going to be covering, three basic things and hope to have some conversation around this. So the first is introducing a new product capability that we call Application Studio, and also just giving a little bit of context on why this is something we're so excited about and why we also see it as a natural extension and a really exciting one of really the line of work that we've been working on for 5.5 years, both pre and at the company. Then we're extremely excited and humbled to announce our $35 million Series B round of funding with a bunch of great new partners on board, one of whom, Ravi over at Lightspeed. We're going to have a chat that was pre-recorded, a fireside chat that's going to be at the tail end of this session. And then also announce something that's very near and dear to my heart and many on the team, which is trying to open up the floodgates to some of the great folks and projects that we used to entirely work around back at Stanford, and opening up this via this research accelerator pilot for free licenses to qualified applicants. And yeah, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into it. I'll also note that there's going to be about maybe 20 minutes of going through this content, and then we'll do a 10-minute Q&A. So I'm just trying to see if I can. I can't see the questions during, but if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A forum, and then I'll get to them at the end. And that's actually what I'm most looking forward to, which is some discussion. So without further ado, the first exciting thing that we announced last week is a product capability that we call Application Studio. And this is all about making it both fast and templated to build not just the data sets that fuel AI or the models, but actual full applications. And for those that have worked in especially complex application types, things like information extraction, where we have very old roots or other complex tasks, you know that it's never, almost never enough to just train a single model. It's usually one or more models or statistically learned operators. It's some preprocessors, it's some post-processors, and it's also all the pieces that go into that. If you're doing it the Snorkel way, it's how do you choose the programmatic labeling strategies, what models do you use, what data viewers and analysis tools do you put in your toolkit for this application type. And we're really excited to both extend the custom capabilities for building new application types, but also template kind of as starting points some of the most common ones in Application Studio, which is currently in preview and is going to be rolling out this quarter to customers and then more broadly thereafter. So let me take a step back and just give a little bit of a whirlwind reintroduction to what Snorkel is and what our platform Snorkel Flow does and what motivates it all. So I'll start back in, this actually, started back in 2015 when myself and my co-founder Chris and others were looking around at the space as, with our ML systems researcher hats on, and saying, okay, what are the big shifts? What are the big, sea change or tectonic shifts, whatever, buzzword metaphor you prefer, that are going to change the tooling landscape and change where the bottlenecks and focus points are in actually getting machine learning powered or AI applications deployed. And if you look at supervised learning, which is where we largely focus, so I want to train a machine learning model or an AI model to take in data points, whether they're chest x-rays or legal documents or customer chat transcripts or network flows, and then render a prediction or extract some information from it, or choose an action or a way to route them or rank them. In this general setting, you have three basic ingredients. You have the data, where this, and specifically the training data, where you have a bunch of example data points that are labeled with the correct answer or the correct action. And then you have the model that actually learns from this training data to now make new predictions on unseen data. And then you have all the infrastructure. You have the hardware layer, the software layer, the frameworks that actually train and serve these models. And being a little bit glib, but looking with our high-level glasses on, over the last 5+ years, there's been a massive trend of commoditization and accessibility, and also success of model architectures, notably deep learning ones, the infrastructure to support them. And it's now never been easier to get an incredibly high-performing model trained up on what used to be a grand challenge task, something like text classification or extraction, image labeling or segmentation, and the list goes on. So, what's the catch is the kind of inevitable question that we started asking ourselves back in 2015. If we said, if this trend is actually going to come to bear, what's the trade-off? There's no such thing as a free lunch. What happens? What gets more painful as a result? And the big trade-off with these really powerful and much more accessible and push-button deep learning models is that to learn their own features, to learn how to do more with less input, they require a lot more data, and specifically labeled training data. And so what we've seen, and what we kind of put our chips on back then, was that the training data was going to become one of the most painful bottlenecks, especially in settings where it wasn't cheap or easy to label. And just to give one example of this, just to put some hard numbers against this, is some numbers from a paper that was published in Cell Patterns recently with some of our great collaborators at Stanford Medicine and the VA healthcare system. In this setting, we were trying to do a triage or a human assist setup, actually motivated by low resource hospital settings where there's just an overwhelming number of, say, chest x-rays in the queue and not enough doctors to read them. So it's really important to prioritize what gets read first if there's an emergency coming in. So we were trying to train a triaging model, or we did this across several use cases, but I'll focus on just one as an example of chest x-ray classification. And to actually build this machine learning model that classified chest x-rays with near human accuracy, this would have taken multiple PhD theses or large engineering teams to even approach good performance on 10 years ago. Today, or rather about a year or two ago, when this was done, took about a day or two. So this is one way of putting hard numbers against the tremendous progress and accessibility and effectively commoditization that we've seen around models. Conversely, it had taken 8 person months, and across the applications we surveyed, 8 to 14 person months of hand labeling, of just a radiologist sitting there labeling historical studies one by one to actually get this to work. And the difference between a little bit of labeling and the full 8 person months was over an order of magnitude greater than what model you chose. So this is very exemplary of what we see today. AI projects are made or broken based increasingly on the data, how much of it you have, how it's labeled, how it's managed, how it's relabeled as conditions change, much more so than which model you pick or what infrastructure solution you pick. So this again informs our core motivation and one of the enduring core motivations of the company now, which is to solve this blockage point around the data that most or many applications face when they actually are tried to when the teams face when they try to actually deploy real world applications using the power of AI and machine learning. And I'll note an important bit of detail is that a lot of this is governed by what you could think of as the unit annotation cost over time of labeling this training data. Is it really cheap and you only need to label it once? Or is it really expensive and you're constantly relabeling it? So it's a constant expenditure. And in some settings, if you're trying to label, say, cats versus dogs, this can be done fairly inexpensively, at least amortized over time. It's cheap to get this labeled because it doesn't require domain expertise to label cat versus dog. The data is public, so you can ship it out somewhere to be labeled, and it doesn't change that often. Cats and dogs don't interspeciate that often or change in a huge way, and so you can label a training set and then have that be a useful asset for a long time. Conversely, in many verticals, many of the ones that we serve customers in currently, in finance, government, healthcare, biotech, pharma, insurance, the list goes on, you have data that is often very private, so it's very hard to ship off-prem to be labeled, very high expertise in that there's a lot of subject matter expert knowledge that is needed to actually do the labeling. And the data, either the input data or the output objectives or both, are changing constantly, so you're constantly having to relabel this data. So the approach that we've been doing, core research on for over 5.5 years, and now that we've been working on for a little over 16 months at Snorkel AI, is one in which we try to raise the level of abstraction just one notch, from labeling by hand to labeling programmatically, as the interface not just to the data, but to the whole ML development process. And this has its roots in a big research project at Stanford, where we were fortunate enough to partner with and deploy with all of the FANG tech companies, lots of government partners, lots of great collaborators on the science and medicine and nonprofit side. This resulted in 40+ peer-reviewed publications about the core theory and some of the applications and the various lessons learned throughout this new pipeline that results when you're labeling data programmatically. And then we were excited and fortunate to spin out the company and spin out the team in 2019. And now Snorkel works with customers, including 2 of the top 3 US banks, government agencies, global enterprises in telco, insurance, biotech, and beyond. And as we're announcing today, we're fortunate to be funded by many great folks, including now Lightspeed. So this looks like a marketing slide, and I definitely stole it from our marketing team, but it's actually a technical and product concept that's quite central to what we've been building over the last 2 and in some ways 5+ years, which is that this shift from hand labeling to programmatic labeling of data actually defines not just a trick to label data more effectively or efficiently, which it does, but it really defines an entirely new way of going about iteratively developing AI applications. And so this is what our platform Snorkel Flow actually supports. And there's 4 basic steps that you can conceptualize, and I'm going to walk through quickly now. First is where the kind of input paradigm shift occurs, where you can label data by hand if you want, and we have full capabilities for that, but also programmatically in this higher level and more efficient way. You can then let Snorkel Flow take that programmatic input, clean it up, integrate it, turn it into a clean, confidence-weighted training set, train models, either push button with AutoML capabilities in platform, or on your own models externally via our Python SDK, and then crucially close the loop. And if I were to sum up what the entire project has been about, and what we're extremely excited to see occurring in many customer accounts today, is this shift really from machine learning development as this process that is 80 to 90% just labeling data and relabeling data by hand, and then a bunch of messing around with hyperparameters at the end, to something that looks a lot more like any other type of mature iterative software development process, where you write some code or push some buttons through a no-code UI, compile, or in this case, learn a model, see where there are error modes, and then go back and correct, and do this in the span of a few hours or days rather than months. And to actually close the loop on that radiology example, using Snorkel Flow, those teams were able to do that 8 person-months worth of labeling programmatically in 8 hours. And not magic, just being able to programmatically express their expertise, what they knew about the radiology domain, rather than having to only communicate it via click, 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 labeling examples one by one. And that's a key theme that we'll come back to too, of this ability to really empower and loop in the subject matter expert into the process, let them directly express their expertise rather than only being able to and asked to label data. Okay, so now I'm going to breeze through some of the kind of high-level steps here. And again, if there are questions, would love if you could contribute that to the Q&A chat window, and we'll get to them and hopefully have some good discussion in about five or so minutes. So the first step in Snorkel Flow is to define what we call a labeling function. And this is a simple example where, unfortunately, our indentation got messed up. So this might not make the, well, either way, we can parse it. And here we're just imagining hopping examples to, let's say we're trying to classify contracts in a, say a finance or legal setting, rather than asking the subject matter expert, in this case, say a legal analyst, to sit there and just label thousands or hundreds of thousands of contracts according to how we want to say classify them or pull information out of them. We ask them to just express what they know as a labeling function. In this case, it's a heuristic. It's saying, look for a keyword like the word credit in the title. And if you see it, label it as a credit agreement, otherwise abstain. These labeling functions can express really anything that can be formulated as a function that takes in a data point and labels or abstains. You can dump in legacy heuristics, other machine learning models, manual annotations, especially ones that come from untrustworthy sources, Boolean logic. You can leverage ontological or knowledge-based information. There's a myriad of ways that we've published about over the years. Basically, all of these can be dumped into Snorkel Flow, and they can be dumped in via either a no-code UI, where you basically can leverage templates, which is part of what we announced in Application Studio, that these template libraries we call builders, or also via Python SDK if you just want to express arbitrary logic with arbitrary imports. So basically, rapid push button development of these labeling functions, but also complete expressivity via the Python SDK. Okay, so some of the advantages, which we'll highlight again at the end, hopefully, kind of are clear and fall out of this abstraction leap from labeling by hand to labeling programmatically, right? You can label, a huge volume of data to train machine learning models in a fraction of the time, 8 person months down to 8 hours. And we've seen many occurrences like that we've reported about, both from customer case studies and in the literature. You can also get all these other qualitative benefits. You can now audit what is teaching your model. You can correct biases or inaccuracies because you can just go back and change code. You can share and manage inversion. But what's the catch? As we said in the beginning, there's no such thing as free lunch. That's a core belief that we have here at Snorkel AI. Well, the catch, or rather the challenge that we've worked on for over half a decade in terms of laying the theoretical and algorithmic and practical foundations, is often referred to as weak supervision modeling. It's the question of, how do you take these labeling functions that in general are not going to be 100% accuracy, are not going to cover all the data, may in fact be correlated and tangled in messy ways. This is often what we call weak supervision. How do you integrate it and clean it up? And some of the intuition of a part of this process is actually to look at their patterns of agreements and disagreements. And then with formal guarantees, we can learn how to up and down weight their outputs and combine them together. And Snorkel Flow does all this for you. It takes in the labeling functions, which again, don't need to be accurate. It's still not a garbage in, gold out process. You want to be able to build better labeling functions to have better outputs. And that is indeed what Snorkel Flow empowers you to do very rapidly, whether you're writing code or pushing buttons in the no-code interface. But Snorkel Flow takes that, and they don't need to be perfect, and cleans and combines it. And then once you have this large, clean, integrated, and confidence-weighted training set, you can train models in platform in a push-button way or via the Python SDK. And then, crucially, you can go and close the loop. And this is something, again, just to underscore that you can't do if you're starting with a hand-labeled approach. It's not just that labeling a bunch of data by hand is a very, manually intensive and expensive and slow way to start a project. It's that you can't really change those hand labels when either something changes, or you want to improve the training data set in the model, or you want to adapt it for new output objectives. In Snorkel Flow, it's as easy as just going back and changing code, and we have a guided set of analyses to actually to guide that process. So I'll just breeze through some of the things that we're excited about. There's more details on the website, but we're very proud to have supported via Snorkel Flow customer deployments such as contract intelligence and extraction analysis at a top 3 US bank, where went from 6 months to develop a model to under 24 hours, to accelerating news analytics at another top 3 US bank, where we were able to go 45 times faster compared to a hand labeling approach, and improve by over 25% over a black box vendor system for a custom news analysis task. At a global PNC insurer, where we were able to, again, or rather, these are all stories of our users, what they're doing on top of Snorkel Flow. So we're just supporting in the background, but where our users in this space were able to build models to support underwriting, and to do this with a 10x reduction in labeling costs and an 8x increase in speeds. And again, a lot of these applications are going from the realm of not really practical to tackle to now practical and efficient with this approach. And more broadly, if we look across both published peer-reviewed papers that we've put out over the years, both the Stanford one I mentioned, Google, Intel, and there are others that are not listed here, as well as some of these customer case studies, you see Snorkel Flow able to save person months to even person years of hand labeling effort with similar quality. So where does that take us today? Well, a lot of the details, not just in a trick, as I said, or in this basic workflow of building these programmatic labeling strategies and training models that way, but it's about the broader application that you can develop when unlocked by this programmatic approach. And again, driving your ML development process by programmatic data really changes how you go through the whole, not just data development, but also ML and AI application development process, which in the broadest scope is often a lot more complex than just training a single model. And we're very excited to, again, announce in preview Application Studio, which templates all of these components, both those labeling functions and the templates to build them, data viewers, models, but also these broader components and essentially operator graphs that define applications. So I'm going to keep moving on, but happy to talk more about what that means in the Q&A session, just so we can get to that for a few minutes. Again, just to wrap up, I'll note that it's not just about saving money on labeling or being a little bit faster to get that first model out, where in fact we have shown that we can be, Snorkel Flow can make it a lot faster to get that first model out. But it's also about increases in accuracy by bringing more data that can be programmatically labeled to bear. It's about making AI applications much more adaptable and auditable, because you can now go back and just change the code that is labeling the data that they train on, rather than having to just throw it out and relabel by hand from scratch every time there's a shift. It's about also bringing together not just data scientists and developers, but also subject matter experts to collaborate in a meaningful way, rather than just asking the subject matter experts to label 100,000 examples and then otherwise stay out of the process. And this really fundamentally redefines what building an AI application looks like. And it's also about things like privacy, where you can avoid having as many eyes on the data via programmatic labeling, and many other things. But many of these qualitative factors are actually some of the most important things that our customers are seeing in their shift to using Snorkel Flow and building on top of it. So I'll keep this quick, and we'll have this chat with Ravi next. But we're very humbled to have Lightspeed on board and backing our Series B, and we're very excited to use this capital to both expand our product, to productize a lot more of the research that we've worked on over the years, of which we've only really productionized a fraction of still to date, and to accelerate our journey to get Snorkel Flow out to many of you who have signed up on the wait list and expressed interest. Also, I'll leave details to the website, but we're very, very excited. And even though I'm trying to go a little fast to save time for Q&A, I don't want to skip over how important this is to us. We've worked with researchers, scientists, data scientists at nonprofit organizations from the very beginning for years back at Stanford. We're excited to open this research accelerator pilot, where we are going to offer free and early access to Snorkel Flow for qualified academic or non-commercial researchers, data scientists, et cetera. So if you're interested in that, please reach out or fill out this Google form that we have linked here and on the website. Awesome. So now we'll transition into a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll follow that up with fireside chat, so to speak, with myself and Ravi, who we're extremely fortunate to now be teaming up with via the Series B investment. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share and transition into Q&A. And again, I'd encourage anyone who wants to chip in and answer. We have about 5 minutes. And if we have overflow, obviously very excited to always talk later offline. So we have a first question here, which I'll mark to answer live, which is, can I use an existing rule-based system's inputs? And yeah, this is a great question. So a lot of the motivation and design principle behind Snorkel Flow and the broader Snorkel approach to programmatic labeling is that we want to actually be able to leverage all of the domain expertise that that we already have encoded in various ways, right? In some sense, there's been this kind of decoupling via a very strict API in machine learning, right? The basic paradigm is these labeled data points, or XY tuples, if you like thinking in terms of math, come in, and At that point, the machine learning model and the machine learning engineer takes over, and we don't care where those label data points come from. We don't need to interface with that rich domain expertise or doctor or lawyer or network technician or whoever it is who did the labeling. And we just have to focus on these labeled data points, these XY tuples. And that's a great and clean abstraction for the progress of the field, but it becomes increasingly silly in practice. Why can't we use the domain experts' knowledge? Why can't we use existing rule-based systems or existing models or existing knowledge bases and ontologies? I actually had a recent Nature Communications paper from one of our affiliates at Stanford on using ontologies to train medical NER models with Snorkel. And the answer is you can. And so that's actually a core motivation of the entire paradigm, which is you can just use all the existing knowledge. And rather than the standard ML answer would be just throw it out and start labeling data. Welcome to the future. And this is often both wasteful and abrasive actually in person when these people have all this rich knowledge that we should be using. Instead, the answer in Snorkel Flow is great. Dump that in. Rule-based systems, whatever you have, use this as labeling functions to bootstrap your machine learning model. Awesome. So another question, will this product capability handle a regression-based outcome? And absolutely, that's on our roadmap. There's some interesting stuff in the works. There's both extensions of the core theory and algorithmic approaches, as well as the implications of the UI and the overall platform. So it's definitely something we've been thinking about. We're always receptive with our product roadmap to market demand. Right now, it's happening a little bit down the line, but absolutely, after classification and extraction, regression is absolutely on the list. Great. And I know we're a little tight on time, so let's see. We have a question just to verify, can it run on premise? And so yes, well, there's a multi-part question here, but just to answer quickly, a lot of our customers are especially interested in a programmatic labeling approach because they have data that needs to sit on premises and can't be shipped out to some outsourced labeling solution. And so, on-premise deployment or on customer-hosted clouds, as well as on Snorkel-hosted clouds, these are all in the menu for ways to get to use Snorkel Flow. And there's also, open APIs to enable integration. So via the Python SDK, some of the motivation, like I said in the beginning, is this Cambrian explosion of models and infrastructure and tools out in the space, which we think is incredible. And so Snorkel Flow defines an end-to-end iterative development process, so you can very rapidly iterate and get the value. But it also integrates at every point of that pipeline via Python SDK and APIs to play nicely and integrate seamlessly with all the other tools that you might have that you'd like to use. I have a question here. Are there types of data that are harder or impossible to automatically label? And that's a great question. There's a lot of work that we've done on the research side to kind of probe this question, because when you're a systems researcher and still when now we're commercializing it, the question isn't is it better or not? It's where is it going to provide the most value, right? That's the academic question. It's also the question as a company. And so there's certainly data types that are better or worse fits for the paradigm. A lot of it has to do with the programmatic labeling strategies available to you. But we have been able over the years to show that Snorkel Flow can achieve can yield very significant gains and both practical and quantitative on a range of data modalities. So this ranges from text to what we call semi or richly structured data like PDF, HTML, et cetera, to image, to video, to even time series and sensor data. But a lot of it depends on the task, and we have more details of that in the literature. And there's a question about working on NER models. Absolutely, this is something that we've published about for years and is a very core part of the Snorkel Flow platform. Okay, and I'll answer one last question, and then I know we need to move on. One question that I think is very important to answer, and apologies for not being able to get to all of these, but I'll try to answer them via text during the Fireside chat just to wrap things up. Another one is, how do you validate the models if there's no gold standard? And so, as I covered, learning how to estimate the accuracies of these labeling functions, their correlations, their expertise areas, how to essentially combine them. This is a problem that we've shown with theoretical guarantees can actually be done without separate gold or hand-labeled data. But the final validation, any of those numbers that I showed or that has been published in any paper about the Snorkel technology over the years or any customer case study, that's all on hand-labeled, on a small hand-labeled validation set. So Snorkel Flow saves you from having to label this massive training set that your machine learning model or AI application needs to learn from. But we always recommend labeling a little bit of good old-fashioned blind held out expert labeled validation data to get your final numbers on. And that's certainly the case for any numbers that we'll ever report. Okay, I think we need to segue into the Fireside chat. But thank you all for the awesome questions. And I will try to answer some of the remainder via text. And also, we're excited if you're eager to have more conversation here and learn more about Snorkel Flow, please reach out. We're really excited and really appreciative of you all taking the time to join this morning. Hey, well, we're really excited now to transition over to chatting with our guest, Ravi Mhatre. We're just super excited and humbled to have him joining the Snorkel team and board. Ravi, for those who don't know him, is one of the founders and managing director at Lightspeed Venture Partners, who led Snorkel's Series B that we're announcing today. And we're super excited just to have a little bit of a chat on some of the themes that motivated us deciding to team up and Lightspeed deciding to come and join the Snorkel party. So Ravi, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. I'm super excited that we've had the opportunity now to officially become partner to you and Chris and the entire Snorkel team. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's mostly about now, getting auto subscribed to all the latest little Snorkel merch. So that's obviously we know why people invest. It's
I proudly wore my new, as I told you, my new Snorkel sweatshirt and hoodie to Pete's this weekend. I was trying to do some informal recruiting for you.
There we go. It's better, the best walking billboard that we could get in this area for sure. So we're honored. Awesome. So I'll ask a couple of questions and then also Riff just to lightly structure this. So obviously we'll be talking about a lot of Snorkel related themes, but I'm also just interested to talk to you, Ravi, about just general trends in this kind of new frontier, new Wild West of AI meets enterprise, and many of us like myself and co-founders have been working on AI ML for years, and the community is working on it for decades. But I think no one will deny that we're really seeing a real inflection point in terms of not just awareness but actual adoption. And though I'd say it's still in the minority, actual massive value in the average enterprise getting derived from AI. And so I'm just excited to maybe get some of your very unique perspective on not just Snorkel, but especially this broader trend. And so just maybe to start, you've spent over 2 decades investing in software companies that have really radically changed the enterprise technology landscape, how enterprise technology is defined. Companies like AppDynamics, MuleSoft, and many more. Now that we're moving into the AI world, how do you see, broadly speaking, AI changing the enterprise technology stack?
Alex, that's a great question. And you're right. It's been over 20 years now investing in a variety of companies that have, I think, truly innovated in terms of the products and the architectures that they brought to the enterprise technology ecosystem. And what's interesting, companies like Nutanix or AppDynamics or MuleSoft, these have all been highly successful companies. But what they have really done is innovated in terms of a set of capabilities that operators of current technology stacks could use to be better at how they use the current technology infrastructure. And that has a tremendous amount of value, whether it's AppDynamics letting you radically change the way you understand the behavior of your applications, MuleSoft creating API scaffolding, which means you can all of a sudden have dramatically more flexibility in how you compose applications out of your underlying legacy application technology infrastructure. What's fundamentally different about AI is that it is not creating better ways of using existing technology. What is fundamentally different about AI and machine learning as applied to the enterprise is it is for the first time going to, first assist and then in some places fully automate human cognitive processes. And that transformation, in my mind, it's going to be much larger and farther reaching than the prior generations or innovations in software technology, because all other generations were about making people more efficient at using technology. This is about automating the cognitive function that people apply in their knowledge working functions in the enterprise.
I think it's a great point. And this kind of going from just improving to real 0 to 1 capabilities and to actual capabilities that are at the level of what you used to require humans to do, or you'd struggle to get heuristic code written and in some rickety fashion that would partially do, is what I think has had us all excited about AI. Though I would certainly mention that we're working with 2 of the 3 top U.S. banks and a number of customers, horizontal applications, but across many verticals: insurance, telco, government, et cetera. And actually, in all these settings, it's usually a mix of assist or replacement of tasks that kind of no one wants to do or no one has the scale to do, right? So, for example, we're Snorkel Flow, our platform is being used to build a lot of applications for pulling information out of huge complex piles of documents or network data, network flows, or all kinds of PDFs, web pages, image, video, all kinds of what we're traditionally calling unstructured data. And no one has the time to look through all these, right? And so you're taking things that you would have required a human to do, but the humans, the subject matter experts who are very much central drivers and participants of both Snorkel Flow, but we think necessarily of the AI process, don't have the time either. But now you're able to actually scale out their domain knowledge, their capabilities with the power of AI. So it's as you said, cognitive level skill replacement, but it's actually just extending existing operators' capabilities, which is super exciting because you have many stakeholders excited to get those capabilities inside the org.
Alex, I really agree with what you're saying. And when we think about enterprise companies and how they can use AI and data to really become more productive, become more competitive, one of the places where we sort of say that we can look and see what the future may bring is looking at some of the web scale companies that were natively born on the web, where from the beginning, their design point was ingesting massive amounts of data and information that wasn't particularly well structured. And then in the way their company designed how they went to market, they embedded in that was using all of the data essentially to better optimize the product experience and the user experience. And a couple of obvious companies that come to mind are an Amazon in retailing and product search, where when you go there, you aren't just looking for a product that's on the shelf, which was even Walmart, which was best in class. You would walk into a Walmart store, you had 20,000 SKUs. When you go to the Amazon website, you're entering a store where there's 1 million SKUs, and no human is going to have the ability to be able to make sense of that, and no merchandiser on the backside is going to know how to take 1 million SKU store and deliver a great experience to me. However, if you can harness the power of computers and data to make the experience magical for me, based on all my prior history now, I mean, for 10 years, I've been shopping at Amazon, and all of the varied transactions through the different stages of my life, if computers can take that and intersect it with 1 million SKU store and find how to bring the exact right things to me at any moment based on a combination of maybe what I've searched for and what I've shopped for in the last week, the experience becomes unlike anything that I would have had shopping in a physical retail store. And the experience is so different that I, don't really equate the two as being the same anymore. And it just sort of shows the power of what machine intelligence can bring to a new experience that a person would have versus a traditional domain. And Google, could say something similar. If you really look at, the magic of what a search experience is today, it's really just something that's informed by an incredible amount of history on what most humans in the world have done in terms of their search patterns, and then personalized to what people like me do. It allows, computers are able to do what people couldn't do, which would be to try to pore over, trillions and trillions of search requests probably to understand me and my persona, what would be best suited to me. But computers can do that. And you sort of see, I mean, those are two companies where the power of how they've used AI automation has really allowed them to kind of be in a class all of their own compared to traditional businesses. And I think, you know, the realization has now happened that, again, being able to automate at computer scale, cognitive functions on data, if we can really allow traditional enterprises to do that, the ones that figured out first, you know, are really going to look like they have superpowers. They're going to be able to respond to the market. They're going to be able to respond to their clients in ways that aren't incrementally better, which is what you get with traditional new software innovations. They're going to be able to respond to the customers in ways that just look fundamentally different and not like anything that a traditional enterprise would offer. I mean, that's why we, you know, at some level are you know, quite bullish, quite optimistic about the transformational nature, I mean, that the AI potentially can provide.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it really is that, you know, that aspect. A lot of people think of you know, of the current reality or the bull case for AI as, you know, massive superhuman intelligence applied to some, you know, massively complex task. But really where it's had massive impact, and where I think it's going to continue to have massive impact, is those settings where you're taking a, you know, simple, maybe, you know, simple to medium sized cognitive task and just doing it at the scale that only, you know, compute can achieve, right? So actually, you know, a lot of the stuff that we still, you know, or that users still use our you know, Snorkel Flow today for, and that we started, you know, years ago, I think about like 5 years ago when we started the project at Stanford on, was, you know, all these information extraction problems where the grand challenge was just to train a machine learning model to read out a simple fact from a scientific article or from a legal document or something like that. Something that, you know, might take a little bit of domain expertise, but not a huge cognitive task. But if you could train a machine learning model to do that one thing, you could do it, you know, overnight at scale over, you know, every scientific paper ever published, every loan document in your portfolio. And that combination of just basic cognitive capabilities, which, you know, still are tough, right? But you can achieve if you build it correctly, right? And then plus scale, right? That, you know, that like that SKUs example, it's delivering, you know, it is replacing cognitive capability, or it's at the level of cognitive capabilities, but it's replacing something that no human can do at that juncture of scale and thinking. It's also, you know, another thing to riff off there is that, you know, we got a lot of our early funding and early partnership and thought partnership from, you know, the web scale companies. From, you know, we've published on some of our early studies with Google and Apple and others. And, you know, I think that this is kind of pivoting a little bit, you know, back to the Snorkel story, but that was really a lot of what gave us motivation. You know, first of all, just over the last 5 years, you know, these companies have done, you know, amazing things for the you know, proliferation of AI tools into the open source. And so now you have, you know, all of the same, you know, essentially the same machine learning models and architectures and infrastructure that they use, right? So you look at that and you say, okay, well, you know, all of that is becoming increasingly available and commoditized, and it's a really remarkable accomplishment. What's left? What's the missing piece that, you know, these web scale companies have that modern enterprises don't yet? And, you know, the answer, I guess, when you phrase it that way, seems kind of simple, but it's data. It's years of web scale, carefully curated data. And, you know, frankly, even the web, you know, even the large, you know, largest technology companies still struggle with, you know, labeling and managing this data, this training data. But, you know, that was what really inspired us in the first place, saying, look at what they, you know, look at all this amazingness that's in the space. Can we just fill that last gap, or can we enable people to fill it themselves to actually unlock those, you know, those, as you said, you know, superpower capabilities?
That's a little bit of like all roads at some level do. I think in first principles, they do somewhat lead back to Snorkel or something like Snorkel, because if you designed your company today from scratch, if it was a new company, I mean, this is essentially what a Google or an Amazon, which are all digital, or Facebook to start with, did. You would create an ingestion system where essentially every time you touched a user or somebody digitally and you created a data exhaust stream, as part of how you designed your internal systems, you'd create an implicit way, whether you want to call it labeling, to basically curate that data. So it's like Amazon. If I've gone to Amazon, I don't know, 3,000 times over the last 10 years, every touch point I have, their internal systems curate those data points in a way that the system can learn from it and provide a better experience to me next time. And the challenge for, you know, still today, 95% of all companies were built before the web and before, sort of really the ability to be all digital existed. So they actually have now, it's called digital transformation. Most companies have actually digitized lots of their business information and content, but the reality is it lives in structures that are not set up for computers to be able to understand what that it's digital, but it is really still only human readable. And so now that the algorithms and the platforms and the capabilities are, more democratized, where, somebody could actually use a computer AI system if it had the data and, use it to more scalably make knowledge decisions, you need to feed it the right information to sort of both learn off of and then to make decisions off of. And the only way to do that is with a platform that can take digital information, which is human readable, and turn it into digital information that is computer readable. And so that was the realization, frankly, we had in, understanding why Snorkel is really going to be strategic to unlocking the transition if we want enterprises to actually make the transition to being able to use AI, having a system that can turn all of this digital information into something that the machines can consume, so they then become trained on how to make these decisions. That is fundamentally it is the gate which will, needs to be passed through if we want, basically machine learning to solve business problems. We want that phenomenon to go mainstream. And so it's a really strategic point to be sitting at. And there's a lot of value can get created if the company really, maximizes its potential against that really strategic juncture that it sits at.
Yeah, and we're seeing that with all of our current customers, and we're excited to continue to bring that to market. I mean, this idea, we're lucky that we're still hitting the timing here. This is something that, I'm stealing a quote from my co-founder Chris from back at Stanford, maybe 5-6 years ago about, the world's information being, with this digitization trend, never been more accessible or less readable. Essentially, it's all digitized, it's all there, more of it than ever before, all this raw data, kind of like crude oil, but it needs to be refined to actually power, ML and AI and, decision making and impact. And so that's the juncture that we're setting at. And even down to, kind of the theoretical roots of Snorkel, it's all about saying if you have a lot of this raw unlabeled data, but you're bottlenecked on labeling and curating it, right? As most enterprises and organizations, and even the largest tech companies that we just referred to, really are with many, many problems today. Because even if you could set up an infrastructure to curate it, you can't look into the future and know what your business objectives are. So you're always having to go back and relabel and recurate. So if it's those two ingredients. That's how Snorkel works. It's lots and lots of labeled data, and then an ability to programmatically lots and lots of unlabeled, unstructured, uncurated data, and then a platform to programmatically label it.
So yeah, maybe actually so go ahead. The statistic I heard, I'm not sure, may have been from Devang, but there are 40 billion business documents created annually in the US, and 10% of those change every month. That's 4 billion documents a month. So that means, if you really want to use all of those documents in a way that you can impact your business, somebody needs to be reading. If you're going to use humans, then humans need to be reading these 4 billion documents every month in a way that they can use the information to make better business decisions. And it's usually not one person, it's people across an organization. So you need to find some way to allow those 4 billion documents a month to be readable by a computer. That's just the start point. Once they're readable by a computer, you can then let the computer start to automate cognitive tasks. But it's that first place where the technology really hasn't existed. And so for traditional enterprises that haven't built the systems of a Google or an Amazon, they need to solve that technical problem is strategic to address, and it will unlock all of the downstream ways in which they can get competitive advantage in the way an Amazon or a Google does.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so prohibitive. And honestly, for most enterprises, but this also goes for many units within the big tech companies, they face a tougher problem than, with this kind of web data that we were talking about earlier, because it's not web data that, any human can annotate. It's, complex legal documents, government, reports, government, it's complex imagery, it's medical records, it's network traffic flows, and, with cyber data, it's all these complex things that have privacy constraints, require specially trained experts to label, doctors, network technicians, legal associates, bank associates, analysts, and labeling it is so much more difficult than even what the web scale companies face. And, and that's part of why enterprises actually face a problem that, all of the thought leadership and research that's come out of those web scale company or web scale efforts, I should say, doesn't quite address, or at least that's the gap that we've been trying to fill in some sense. But you know, what I'd be curious to just broaden up the question again and say, what lessons do you think, what challenges do you think enterprise AI is facing or will face, where I guess enterprise AI companies like us, could or should take a lesson from non-AI enterprise technologies?
That's less about technology per se and more about almost having empathy as a company for the journey you're taking your clients on, and knowing that getting them successfully to their end goal is the objective, not just sort of delivering amazing capabilities and technical capabilities to a market.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the rather than just another tool to give, another platform to give to the actual subject matter expert, the data scientist who actually knows their organization's data, their goals, the trickinesses of the problem, to actually just try to accelerate them a bit, and that kind of more humble standpoint where you're trying to help improve iterative development, not just drop in a box and have it magically solve everything. That's at least what we've kind of where the Snorkel project was born. I mean, our very first grant from DARPA was pairing us with some genomicists at Stanford, and we wouldn't have built anything the way we did unless we had started with real problems, with real experts in their own data in their own field from day one, and saw, oh, actually this problem is a lot trickier than it looks when it's in some toy ML machine learning benchmark data set, and realizing that those experts have to be at the center. So we try to take the same approach with customers. We give them a platform, but we trust them to be the experts at their data, their problems, and we just try to accelerate them. We try to integrate with with their existing tools and processes, and just accelerate them in the direction they're going and that they know how to go best.
But it's sort of probably being optimistic about how and when these kinds of capabilities can be used to let people do more, and not necessarily subtract from labor, but let the labor you have deliver more and better, good experiences in whatever their domain. And, I think it'll just be interesting to play out. I think a lot of people who don't really understand what AI is, they can be intimidated. They can think it may just somehow be a net zero sum game. And I don't personally believe that to be true, but I think it's going to be the onus on the builders to, construct the world in a way where that's not true. So I don't know.
No, I mean,
it's more of a philosophical view.
Yeah, I think this is this is a morning chat, but we're recording this in the evening, so I think we're allowed to do some philosophizing, right? My dad retired recently as a radiologist, and he day or two after he retired, he's like, okay, now you can go automate radiology. I'm like, Dad, we're not trying to do that. we're doing assist. And he's like, okay, but you can do it. It's fine now. I'm all for it. I'm like, no, we're not. And that's very much been our viewpoint. I mean, again, it's not just data scientists that use our platform. It's also often, actually, in some customer accounts, it's the non-technical experts. We have one insurance customer, more non-developer underwriters on the platform than data scientists, actually. And so they're part of the process, and they're replacing these kind of low-level tasks at scale that they either don't want to or can't do. Can't read that many documents, and they don't want to. So they can get back to doing the kind of higher level tasks that these AI pieces, these AI building blocks enable. So maybe just to wind things down here, I mean, maybe just I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the kind of generic but important question for someone with a track record in a firm with a track record like yours and Lightspeed's. We're completely honored to get to team up with you all and have you on board. What in general do you look for? Both, I think people watching might be curious about this. What do you look for when you make investments in companies, in particular in the AI space?
I mean, I think generally it boils down to people, teams. I mean, there's always sort of the generic things we're looking for. Big markets. We're looking. Lightspeed. So our core mission, our philosophy is we want to find people who authentically have the ambition and the credibility and the right to go after building something in the technology space that can be really transformational and can, it's the old Steve Jobs thing, can make a dent in the universe in the chosen domain. And we're all about finding, people who we think are really special and have the right to go do that and go win in a particular area. And AI is no different. I would say in AI, I think the bar is quite high in terms of, not only the kind of academic training and I'd say intellectual depth that it takes to really be able to kind of get your arms around all of the technical capabilities and aspects needed to deliver truly a innovative platform. I think in AI also right now, because there's so much noise in the space, a team like Alex and Chris and everyone else and Devang at the company, it's just people who really, have pretty extraordinary pedigrees and track records broadly in the AI space. Means that notwithstanding all the noise, I mean, people are interested, but they're confused and they're getting inundated. I think Snorkel and the team at Snorkel is one that is basically got incredible, both market access, academic industry access right now, which if you're going to start a company in AI, if you need that kind of a calling card to be able to break through the noise. So, a long answer, but we do really look for teams that we think are, when I say exceptional, it's really more about probably goal alignment that, hey, you really are here because you have deep passion and belief to want to do something transformational. And we believe in that too. And then I guess sort of more practically on, when we invest in a company, we are always looking for products that we think are going to be positioned with, the right to win and, the right to be transformative in a space. And I think, again, there's always these things that are a little bit subjective, but I do think Snorkel's, open source platform, if we're right about all the other parts of this conversation, which is, enterprises really, understand that being able to harness their large pools of, business information and kind of unstructured data, that's where they can get competitive advantage. And that the bottleneck on that is there's no way to have people do it. So you want to have machines be able to read and understand that data. If we're right about all those things, then I think, the Snorkel platform is absolutely viewed as probably one of the premier, it'll be one of the go-to platforms that you try to use to create machine readable data out of all of this kind of dark pool of business information. And so, when we think about kind of product position, even at the very early days in this market, I think, Snorkel OSS it's something that Alex and Chris and others have been working on for a long time. It has a lot of halo effect and pedigree. So I think, Snorkel is just a company, again, of the things that Lightspeed looks for: exceptional team, in terms of what I've described as what we're looking for in terms of ambition, really strong, well-positioned product in a market. I think all of those things, are important to us. And, when we met with, we'd known Alex before, but we sort of talked about the Series B. It was very clear that those ingredients, are here to go on a pretty incredible journey. So, that's kind of how we think about it.
Well, Ravi, you're way too kind, but I will be, working every day to live up to those expectations that we have for ourselves and as well. I mean, this has been our baby for years, and we're so we completely agree. We want to get it out there. We've seen a hint of the value it can provide. We want to get it out there, and it's going to be a journey. But we're so honored to have you along, and we feel obviously exactly the same. We've talked to tons of people, but the level of kind of expertise and really grounded expertise at the wealth that you and Lightspeed have in the equally, or at our stage, more important part, I'll say equally important part of how do you take some of those technologies and product, fundamentals and actually, bring them to market and communicate them, as you said, patiently, but with urgency to the market, and actually get them positioned in the place in enterprises and with people where they can actually have the value that we're convinced that they should have, and we see that they do have with customers. That's just, you guys at Lightspeed are unparalleled in your expertise there, and we're so excited and honored to get to work with you. So maybe we can, well, I'll ask one last question before we wrap up. If I'm making no promises, because I'm not the sole owner of the product roadmap, so I don't want to get in trouble with my co-founders and team. But if Snorkel could help, build one AI application to automate something in your life, what would you pick?
Well, I don't know, that may be pretty far down the road map because it would need to incorporate robotics, but I do need an AI bot to just come in and organize everything about my life at home because I'm fundamentally a person who believes in piles, and my wife goes crazy and I have piles of, for work related things, piles of clothes. So an AI robot that could come in and just magically organize and know where every place needs to go in the house would be ideal. But I think you're gonna have to do a merger with a robotics company to probably field that.
I was gonna say. So look, let's end this with, let's consider it an open call for you know, robotics partner or JV out there in the market if anyone's interested. You have our number, so to speak. Anyway, Ravi, thank you so much for the time today. This was an awesome chat as always, and hopefully for those listening in, there were some tidbits here that were of interest. You know, not just about Snorkel, but you know, just broader thoughts on this. You know, really still evolving space. Whether you look at it from, you know, the perspective that you know, someone like, you know, like Ravi that you uniquely have on the market, the perspective that, you know, we've brought from our kind of technical angle. Anyway, you look at it, you know, things are just getting started here. And yeah, anyway, thank you, Ravi, so much for the time.
Yeah, and thanks for having
So
me.
excited to get
Really
to
enjoyed this. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, that'll wrap up our session today. Thank you for everyone that joined, and for taking the time, and for some of the great questions, which some of which I tried to answer, at least in part, in the Q&A box. And yeah, we're super excited to get to answer more questions, have more discussion, more dialogue, and hopefully get to talk directly with all of you that were on the call today. So thank you, and have a great day.